Welcome to Everlasting Talk. Welcome to Everlasting Talk. I'm your host, Ever. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we continue, make sure to like, follow, subscribe on Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, Blogger, Kick, and more. Today, we're doing a biography series. We're talking about Maximilian the First of Mexico. Maximilian I of Mexico was an Austrian archduke who became emperor of the short-lived Second Mexican Empire. Let's get started. Born on July 6, 1832 in modern-day Vienna, Austria, he was baptized and originally named Ferdinand Maximilian Joseph Maria. His father was Archduke Franz Karl Joseph of Austria, part of the Habsburg Lorraine House, and his mother was Princess Sophie of Bavaria, part of the House of Wittelsbach. But allegedly, many historians say that Maximilian was a product of an extramarital affair, but never proven. Being royalty, he would be tutored at home. He would learn subjects like history, good subject, geography, law, technology, military studies, and more. When he did go to school, he would be a prankster and get into trouble. By 1848, there was rebellions throughout the empire. Hundreds would be executed, and he would condemn the actions of the empire himself. Eventually, in 1853, he would go ahead and join the Austrian Navy and travel the world. By 1856, he would meet the French Emperor Napoleon III and many Mexican conservatives, which will be very important later in his life. Later that year, he would end up meeting and marrying Charlotte of Belgium in a royal palace of Brussels on July 27th, 1857. Obviously, this was due to at the time to create strong relationships with other kingdoms. So that's why he was, wed to Charlotte. But they never had children, but they would still be together, make appearances in various parts of the empire at balls, events, things like that. But allegedly, he would have affairs, here and there. But you know, but although during this time, um, conservatives in Mexico were undermining the Mexican Constitution, calling it null and void. Eventually, it resulted in the Civil War. By 1859, during the Civil War, he was approached to become emperor, but he declined. But the conservatives will not give up. Eventually, Mexico, being in French debt, gave France a reason to invade Mexico in 1862. This is the conflict where the holiday Cinco de Mayo, which everyone confuses as Mexican Independence Day, happened. So, May 5th, 1862, in Batalla de Puebla. Everybody gets drunk, but they don't know what it is. But this is the conflict that's where it occurred. This is the conflict where, people celebrate in the U.S. now, thinking it's Independence Day, but it's not. But anyways, the French ended up disposing the president of Mexico, Benito Juarez, and Maximilian will be placed. And with the United States distracted with the Civil War, it was easy for the French to do it. So if it, because the United States had initiated the Morone Doctrine, so they'll be like the overseer of all the Americas. But since they were busy with their own things, obviously with the Civil War, this is the time the French decided to do it. Maximilian himself will live in Mexico with his wife. He would embrace Mexican culture, but everything was short-lived. By April 1865, the United States Civil War was over, and they turned their attention over back to foreign relations, especially to their neighbor of the South. They were aware that the French were in Mexico, but obviously during the Civil War, they were too concentrated on themselves. But the United States did not recognize Maximilian as emperor, did not recognize France's claim on Mexican land. They began to pressure France. They did not want to invade Mexico, obviously, because they didn't want to get to another conflict. They just got out of a civil war, so they didn't want to get into another one. But um, they they were pressuring them, and they told their allies to pressure France to leave Mexico or else. So the U.S. would eventually maybe want to get into war, but they gave France the ultimate decision. By that time, Maximilian he ended up passing a decree that would allow executions of Juarez's supporters. Around 10,000 people would be executed, and that turned, people like Maximilian, but they didn't like the fact that he did that, so they were turning on him. And by 1866, Maximilian will try to um, end the war on his terms, in favor of the French. He wanted to give, parts of Mexico to France, or, but it failed. Maximilian would eventually go on the run because he was getting chased by Mexican forces. And on May 15, 1861, 7, he would be captured. He was put on trial later, a month later, on June 3rd, and would be executed by firing squad with several of his generals on June 19, 1867. Um, There was pleas from European leaders and others to spare his life. Benito Juarez, the president, back in office, said that this shows an example that Mexico will not tolerate foreign invasion, foreign intervention. They don't care. This is just to show anybody tries it again, they'll go ahead and do the same thing to them. Before he was executed, Maximilian gave this famous quote or speech. He stated, as he quotes, "I forgive everyone, and I ask everyone to forgive me. May my blood, which is about to be spilled, and the bloodshed which has been experienced in my new motherland, long live Mexico, long live its independence." Eventually, obviously, he would be executed. His body was embalmed and displayed in Mexico and sent back to Austria 6 months later and buried at the Imperial Crypt on January 16th, 1868. There is a memorial in Querétaro, in Mexico, where his execution occurred. It was a photo of his execution hangs in the Met in New York City. There's also mementos at the Habsburg Palace in Vienna. Also, there's a statue of him in Italy. So he was definitely influential. It's debatable on his legacy. Some saw him as a reformer, wanting to help the Mexican people move forward. Others saw him as short-sighted and naive. The fact that he decided to take a position in power of a country that was sovereign, and there was no way they would win the war. So people saw that, like, because he never would have got in power in Europe. He's always like the second or third behind, so this is his way to get to become emperor, because he will never be able to become emperor in any European countries or empires. So people saw that like he was desperate to become emperor or king, so he took this position, but obviously it failed. There's some films you should check out. There's a 1934 film called Juarez and Maximiliano. There's a 1954 film called Veracruz. There's also a Netflix series, so anything something modern, called The Empress. It talks about the perspective of, I think it was, of his sisters or sister-in-law's perspective during that time. So it's really good. Obviously you could watch some older films, you could watch something new. There's a books as well you could check out. But yeah, that's Maximiliano the First of Mexico. He was a short-lived emperor of an empire that had you know, no success in succeeding. Obviously, the only thing that came out of this was Cinco de Mayo, unfortunately, and that's the only thing people remember for this conflict between France and Mexico, that people now in the U.S. and parts of the world could celebrate on Cinco de Mayo. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Next time, I'm gonna talk about John D. Rockefeller. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, Blogger, Kick, and get your gear and stuff on Spring. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye, y'all. Thank you for listening to this episode of Everlasting Talk. For more content, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at EvarlastingTalk. Thank you.